Hey everybody, welcome to another Street Epistemology review show. I've got a bunch of great co-hosts here today. I've got Nathan, Dali, and JCC. What's up, you guys?
Hey, thanks for inviting us, Reid.
Sure
Thank
thing.
you.
So, Nathan, how have you been liking Clubhouse for the past week or so?
It's great. It's like a simplified version of Discord a little bit with no text chat. It's all voice audio. It's kind of nice. I like it. I can't wait for it to kind of grow a little bit more and get its own website and everything. That'd be nice. But yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. It's fun.
Yeah, right now it's currently iPhone only. Sorry, Android people. And yeah, it's also giving me kind of Blab flashbacks. The main feature of Blab was, a 4-person video chat kind of like this, but also a text chat. And the main feature was that anybody who was hosting one of these, you could see the public list of rooms, and then you could just pop in and out of all of the rooms and then be invited to come on to chat. And that's what Clubhouse is basically, but it's audio only, and you can have more than 4 people, but that's the main feature is the public room ability to like see what conversations are going on. And so yeah, we've been hosting a few generic SE type rooms and getting people to come on and have conversations. We let them make claims, and we just do short SE conversations with them. It's been a lot of fun. And I've got 2 of mine here today. Yeah, Anthony's been on. You've been on, Nathan. Quinn Questions, JCC, a bunch of other people from the SE community, and I hopefully will have a SE Clubhouse. You have to apply for a club in a few weeks, so then we can kind of brand our rooms whenever they go live.
Oh, that'd be good.
Mm-hmm.
So far, I haven't done any actual interviews myself on Clubhouse, though I've answered a ton of questions about SE, and that's great. Like if somebody's interested in it and they want to get to know more about it, or maybe they have some ethical concerns, or maybe they want to know what to do under a certain situation with their friends or family, then it's a great opportunity to connect with people and talk about it. So yeah, let's check it out. What do we got here today?
Let's do it. The first one is about this question: is everyone governed by a single higher principle? With this guy Matthew. And I don't know how well I did, and we kind of got cut short a little bit when I started to ask more like deeper questions, but hopefully I'll be able to talk with Matthew again sometime soon, and we'll do maybe another review. So if you want to say anything, just
so I should be looking out for a report crash?
Not really. I think he just had a run. I think we just ran out of time, or he had to go or something.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, just wave or start talking, and I'll pause it, and I'll pause it periodically to ask for feedback. Here we go. What's up, Matthew?
Hey, thanks for doing this. This is a pretty cool format.
Sure thing.
Yeah, it seems like pretty tough to do too. So we'll see how it goes. So just any claim?
Yeah, any claim you are strongly believe to be the case, or not the case, true or false, and it could be really any category, but ideally something that is kind of core to who you are, or something you would be something that would change you as a person if you no longer believed it or started to believe it.
Yeah. Okay. How about, I think that ethically and basically anywhere where there's a value involved and where there is a norm involved, I guess, something that should govern our behavior, and that it's good that it governs our behavior, or the way that we think, that I think that for a person to be both mature and genuinely ethical requires an absolute, that they're in relationship with an absolute. It doesn't have to be God, say. That's the one that probably pops to mind first.
So if you can't hear that, sorry, it's a little low. His claim is that in order to be an ethical person, you need to have a relationship with an absolute.
Mhm.
So I think that's
Oh, that's what you got. Oh, wow. Okay. I was at the edge of my seat waiting to figure out what that meant. So anytime there's a value or a normative function, it relates to an absolute something. Is that what I heard?
I think so. And when I clarify a little bit more
Good.
to get into it. Yeah.
But even just some category outside of himself, such that, in a conversation like this, I have some concept of something that's above me, which is, I guess it's my concept of the good, but it involves this ignorance that I have. So I'm willing to have, you help me get to it.
Sure.
Yeah. Does this make sense?
Yeah. Let me try to clarify the claim. So I think what I'm hearing you say is, in order for someone to be an ethical person, they need a kind of absolute, either like moral concept or principle or something, in order to be an ethical person.
Yeah, ethical, but also I think in any and every sense, because so if you just take this argument and say, if a person doesn't have an absolute, well, so maybe the argument actually is that everyone genuinely does have an absolute, even if it's only their own capriciousness in the moment. So if you're going to change your mind about something, either you have some principle that determines how you change your mind, or how you act in this new moment with these new informational inputs, these new pragmatic considerations before you. Either it's just capriciousness, in which case, I guess, the absolute is just your contingent psychological state, or it's governed by something else.
I'm trying to listen.
Yeah.
Oh, so he doesn't mean objective versus subjective. He means deterministic. Is that what I'm hearing?
Possibly.
I don't know.
Initially, it seemed like an objective morality argument or an objective morality claim, and now it's seeming like everybody does things for explicit reasons or distinct reasons or absolute reasons.
What did he mean by
that might vary from person to person, and people's motivation are different. Go ahead, JC.
I was going to ask, I wonder what he meant by their own capriciousness to change their mind.
Oh, somebody being intentionally obtuse, or they just want to break down the system, so they're going to do the opposite thing or something like that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to nail down for them what capriciousness means, but that's what it would mean to me in this context. First pass.
So I'm presuming probably Reid, you ask him more.
Yeah, I think I do. Yeah, and I'm partly trying to review this video just so I can more understand his claim if you guys have any better insight on what this is about, maybe that would help me in future conversations. So here we go.
Awesome.
The absolute is just your contingent psychological state, or it's governed by something else. Yeah.
What do you mean by absolute?
I think what I mean by absolute is like it's very difficult, but I think it's something that unifies everything else and in some sense governs and everything else and causes them all to subsist. This is partially probably coming from
Yeah.
I'm glad he said it was very difficult, so it's at least difficult for him too to define what absolute means in this case. That's fine.
Yeah.
My religious background, so I have a problem, and
Let's go back a bit.
everything else and causes them all to subsist. This is partially probably coming from my religious background, so I have probably some theological things preloaded there, but I'm trying to work on this argument that stands regardless of any theological presupposition.
That's a big thing. The idea seems to come from the theological type of background, although he seems to be trying to secularize it or not putting it in that, not having it be, required.
Yeah,
might
that's
ask,
very
like,
laudable.
Is an absolute the same as a limit? Just to because I'm wondering if he's thinking limits, if limits exist, or I'm not. I'd have to clarify more on this absolute and whether or not it's in our minds or in the external world.
Yeah.
I think preloaded there, but I'm trying to work on this argument that it stands regardless of any theological presuppositions.
Okay, this is potentially coming from a theological place, but you want to kind of make it more non-theological, more generalizable, secular principle.
Well, I think it comes from. Well, yeah, it's difficult to say what the origin is, so I won't try to make an argument about that.
Okay, so if a God is not the thing that is the absolute that makes all this stuff work, what other kind of absolute is a potential candidate? Is it just an idea, or is it something else?
Well, I think probably, like, for instance, in Plato, he thinks of the form of the good as sort of taking this role, and he has this weird metaphysics where he thinks, the material world is participating in these abstract forms, and that's why they are the way they are, and then all of the forms are sort of organized under the form of the good. So that's his kind of version of it.
Okay, so I don't know too much about Platonism, but he's saying
That's okay.
All of the material world is acting in some type of Platonic forms, and the major the hierarchy of forms, like everything is participating in the good form. Is that right?
Maybe.
That's what he said. Yeah.
Yeah. It also Platonism is core to Thomas Aquinas thinking that defines God as the unmoved mover. It's the prime mover argument. It's the same arguments that fail when you say an arrow can't get to a target, and that Apollo can never pass the tortoise. Those paradoxes showed that the unmoved mover arguments and all those things failed completely, but apparently they're still adopted in theological thinking to prove that God exists. So when he's talking about these purity of forms and Platonism, I think it's a dead end in philosophy. I think Platonism is either not provable or it's certainly not falsifiable either. It's one of those where it has been adapted to defy analysis.
Okay, I think he moves away from Platonism soon, so let's see what happens.
World is participating in these abstract forms, and that's why they are the way they are, and then all of the forms are sort of organized under the form of the good. So that's his kind of version of it. I don't think that
okay, he just violated
what?
He just violated a core tenet of Platonism, is that those ideal forms have no causal effect. They don't cause anything to occur or prevent anything from occurring. There's no causal distinction between the place where numbers and shapes are and the real world. And yet he's saying that the real world follows the ideal forms because the forms are the ideal forms. And so I think he has just actually stepped on a rake in Platonism.
Okay.
And that's just me picking on that. I think he's got Platonism wrong. Not anything else.
I don't want to harp too.
And I'll stop because that's not SE. That's not the point.
It's fine.
Well, how about this, Dali? What would be your question right now?
I'd be still in definitions. I'd want to understand what one of these forms would look like and how one of these forms might affect anything in our reality. Does it affect our behavior? Is there some hypernatural push toward a particular goal Is there a goal oriented? Is this
I would ask for examples.
teleological thinking? You know, where
Examples?
things are for a
Yeah.
purpose. Yeah. So I'd be, yeah, exactly like that. No, so that's not one question. That was 6, and I would have to pick.
Sure. Yeah. I'm so loaded with questions. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
I think we clarify more here soon.
Okay.
And then all of the forms are sort of organized under the form of the good. So that's his kind of version of it. I don't think that's probably not that plausible either. But you could have something like the moral law, this idea of absolute rationality of conduct. Yeah, I think it could be a variety of things, but it's some principle.
Some principle that is absolute, and by absolute we mean just the principle has the properties of just making sense of everything else. It's the thing that without, everything else would just kind of fall apart. Is that kind of close to it?
And at least it's the principle of change, right? So a new situation confronts you. What is the basis of your response to it? And it seems as though if it doesn't have a single decision factor at some level of abstraction, then somewhere in there, there's a level of capriciousness and arbitrariness.
Okay. I think I missed this when I first listened to this. Can we? I don't know if we need to listen to that again, but let me just hang on. Let me go back like a second to listen.
Yeah, this is hard. This is a really hard one.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I'm still not sure what it is we're talking about yet.
Me either. So that's why I need help.
Sure.
At least it's
Mhm.
the principle of change, right? So
Principle of change.
So a new situation confronts you. What is the basis?
At least it's new. I mean, I've never heard this before, so at least it's
Yeah.
new.
Yeah, it's great.
So, yeah.
Is it for morality, for making
Right, so
Do what?
is it based? Is it like a moral decision to how to handle the change?
I don't know.
Okay.
Let's keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is about values and normative things. Maybe.
That and more, I think. All right.
I have heard arguments kind of similar to this, like greatness exists, and because greatness exists, there must be something greater than all great things.
Yep. Is that
It's
ontological?
kind of similar.
I think it is.
It's it's an ontological argument, I think. This is just saying. This is just that. I'm right now. My impression is this is kind of like that, though. Instead of greatness, you just use another parameter, and in this instance, it's absolutes. It sounds like, and that's the impression I have. So my questions right now would be on figuring out if that's the case, and asking questions like. More what questions rather than why or how questions. What is this absolute? Is it the same thing as a limit? Is it what are some other qualities? If aliens came from some other planet, how would they go about discovering this property of the universe? Yeah, that sort of thing. Cool. Let's keep going. Cool.
At least it's the principle of change, right? So a new situation confronts you. What is the basis of your response to it? And it seems as though if it doesn't have a single decision factor at some level of abstraction, then somewhere in there, there's a level of capriciousness and arbitrariness.
Okay. So, okay. I think the claim is we all need this principle in order to make sense of the world. Really, is absolute principle. Is that the claim, or what's a better way to say it?
And absolute principle. Yeah, and then it wouldn't just apply to making sense of the world. It would also apply to, decision making. Yeah, lots of stuff.
We all need an absolute principle in order to make sense of the world and to act ethically.
Yeah, and in fact, if we, not just that we need one, but in fact, everyone does have an absolute principle, even if it's just the principle of, being ruled by whatever the strongest desire is. So, like, there is a form of everything that occurs. It's just whether or not yours is rational,
Okay.
I suppose.
So there's like an actual true absolute principle that allows us to make sense of the world and act ethically, but some people
I hope
don't.
so.
But some people don't know about it, or just have other things as their absolute. And what I'm hearing you say is they should disregard those things and find the real absolute principle and go with that.
I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
I think he just converted this from a claim about what he believes is true to what he idealizes should be true, what he wants to be true.
People are saying you're a little loud, Dali. Can you turn yourself down a bit?
Sure.
And what did you say?
By saying that he hopes so, this whole claim just converted from something he thought was true in the world to something is aspirational in the world, something he would like to be true.
Yeah.
And so I'm immediately going, oh, hope so. Do you have any counterexamples? Do you have any examples where you are uncertain or you really have to work hard to find out what the absolute thing is because it seems non-absolute in that one case? That kind of idea.
Okay. I think I get our confidence soon. So let's see what that is about. Or just have other things as their absolute. And what I'm hearing you say is they should disregard those things and find the real absolute principle and go with that.
Yeah, that's what I think. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you want to push back? Am I not making sense, or
I want to keep inquiring about the claim and trying to understand your reasons for it, and then you can ask me what I think about it potentially once we're done.
Okay.
So that's the claim. How confident are you about this? 0 to 100.
I think that I have something that I'm going to put a 99 on some sort of kernel of what I have here. I'm probably only about 50% that I've formulated it correctly, and I'm only like 1 or 2% that it couldn't be significantly improved.
Cool, gotcha. So, gotcha. And why do you believe that? What specific claim should we focus on? The one that's 99. What is that claim again? Your 99 claim?
Well, the 99 claim is just that.
That's good. Get him to say it again.
Mm-hmm. Aporia, he's thinking.
That there's the form of an absolute principle in everybody's lives. There's a unified way of, I suppose, describing how somebody exists in the world, and I suppose that just entails this suggestion that we should desire that whatever that principle is makes sense, and that it isn't capriciousness.
Okay. I think the claim is everyone has an absolute in their lives that they can use to make sense of the world and act ethically. Everyone has something. That's the claim.
So not precisely that, because when you say that everybody has something that's absolute in their lives, I actually want to expand it out further. So I want to say even interpersonally, there is an absolute principle. Either there's an absolute principle which governs for any two people, either there's an absolute principle which governs them and their relationship with one another, or at least that is in harmony with the principle that governs each of them. Well, okay, sorry. So imagine that two people don't share an ethical code.
Anything to say so far?
Yeah, what does he mean by ethical code? I would like to know that. And where the premise of the ethical code comes from.
Right now, I can't even imagine where to begin with disconfirmation criteria in my own head. So if I can't, and it took us this long to get to the what of the what, why, how, then I would spend a little bit more time with what it is. And because sometimes you don't even need to get out of the what before you don't even need to get to the why or the how if the what is really confusing for us both. You can just stick around in the what and just talk about the different qualities and characteristics of this thing, and ask if there's any material aspects to it, and then I might like start with like wonder questions. Like, now imagine for a moment you're at a 0 for this claim. You went from a 99 to like a 10 or something. What would the consequences of that shift be for you? Would you, and I would maybe try to leave it really open-ended, not to try to interject your own idea, and just like see if there's a reaction. Maybe there is. And start with wonder.
Yeah, I also saw that capricious was defined as an antonym of reasonable. And for me, I find that those are not very 180 across from each other. And it's being presented a bit as a false dichotomy. It's either rational or it's capricious, but that still makes it absolute. So that leads me to look for a third option, something that is neither rational nor capricious, that somebody might use as a means by which to make a decision. Is it rational for me to fall in love with somebody? Or is it capricious? Or could it be something that is instinctual? Or something that is chemical and outside of my control? Or is learned behavior I'm hardwired for? Something like that. And are those necessarily in those two? So I might be digging for that particular binary. I see it as a false dichotomy, probably.
Okay, cool. And yeah, let's just keep going. And if you want to, in the meantime, just mute yourself. And if you want to say something, unmute, and I'll pause it.
Is in harmony with the principle that governs each of them. Well, okay, sorry. So imagine that two people don't share an ethical code, but they do both share the fact that they can inflict physical violence on one another and their bodies are destructible. So in this case, even though they don't share an absolute principle of, or the absolute principle that they do share isn't, this absolute common ground isn't an ethical common ground where they can, deliberate about some principle and come to an ethical conclusion and sort of decide together in this mutual ethical solidarity. Rather, the absolute principle that can mediate between them is physical violence and, the power of the stronger. But even in that case, there is this absolute shared ground which gives us a description of their relationship to one another.
Okay, so kind of like whenever people are in relation to each other and their actions happen, it's possible to describe their relationship in terms of an absolute principle that governs their relationship. Some people's relationship is kind of governed by the, might always makes right or something. And maybe some people's relationship is guided by a principle kind of like maybe love your neighbor or something.
Yeah, like or even so even if one of these people is governed by a principle, love your neighbor, and another person is governed by a principle, follow the Torah or something. I don't know. But if there's a conflict there between those two, they do still share, regardless of what they think, they still share this underlying fundamental principle, which is about, who's more powerful and who can enforce their will in the situation if such a disagreement arises. So
Okay.
we sort of, yeah, go ahead.
So this is kind of like a descriptive model of human relationships. It's not that the particular people need to be aware of these principles that potentially govern them. It's just kind of like a
although go ahead.
kind of like a from a God's eye view. There's a way to describe their interaction with a principle that is most likely to that type of thing.
Precisely, yeah. Although, it's better if their wills are, oriented in a certain way rather than another way. So it's better for them if they share some ethical framework that that will work out for them. Yeah.
It's better if they share that ethical framework. So anything to say so far? I think I'm tracking a little bit better now.
Yes, I picked out that he used ontology as the basic decider of who in fact has authority.
Okay.
So for me, I'd be making notes to find questions about what about ontology informs authority?
All right.
Yeah.
It's better if they share that ethical framework. So if they kind of
It's
work
better
together,
to be in harmony with the absolute, essentially. Yeah.
it's better to be in harmony with the absolute. So if they're unaware of this absolute principle that's governing them, they could potentially become aware of it and then act in harmony with it, and they'll both live better lives, be able to make sense of the world, act ethically.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So it comes back to this ethical principle. Is there an ethical principle governing all of us in this clubhouse room right now that could be, described from a God's eye view, even though we're not aware of it?
Probably. I don't know if I'm qualified to explicate it, but
Why require it to be just a single principle, or an if an absolute seems to be a single thing, why just one thing?
yeah, that's a really good question. I think so. If you, it gets a little bit,
Because there's like a bunch of different principles I'm trying to act upon, like the whatever ideas and values is in SE. It's like being epistemically humble, trying to seek understanding. There's a bunch of values and principles I'm trying to enact, and
Sure.
and I'm sure there's some that I'm not even aware of, but or that could be described in certain ways. So, but is there an absolute one? And
I found myself able to agree with him suddenly when he said, if we conform ourselves to the best I guess I put the best in myself, the absolute principles, we do better. Okay, so I'm just going to say, in the iterated prisoner's dilemma, we know that tit for tat is the best strategy. If you don't know what I mean, sorry, I just jargoned. But that there is a best strategy under a given logical consequence of social interactions, how to do it best. There is a best. And so to the degree that we conform ourselves to that best strategy, we do better. Yes, and by this point it's a tautology, because empirically we can come back and figure out what the best one is and follow that. Does that mean it's absolute? We back into it. It's not ontologically, it's not exterior definitionally described. It's by analysis of the system entirely. Inside, we can come up with what these are. Maybe there are some best rules in chess, or best moves in chess, I mean. But because we had to back into them, that there in some cases are some absolute best choices, doesn't tell us that usually there will be or what they might be.
Okay, cool. All right, let's keep going.
So if you, it gets a little bit tough to talk about, but just because of how sort of abstract and difficult it is. But I'll just, first of all, I'll put forward another claim, which is either, well, I think sort of, do you know ontology as a general concept?
Like the nature of things and stuff.
Yes.
Is that it?
Yeah, yeah. So ontology is,
So Dali was
Yeah.
onto something. Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
All right.
as far as I use the word, because I'm not actually sure how, how the semantics actually work for certain. But if you distinguish ontology from metaphysics, metaphysics is just generally sort of how does the world work. Ontology is specifically giving sort of an inventory of the most basic stuff. So I think ontologically, either we're going to find, at base, we're going to find one unified thing. You're not going to find multiple different things unless those things are somehow in an interdependent, like their existence depends on one another. Because, I guess because of this problem. So I guess I'll try to put a paradox to you. So imagine that you have two things that are exactly the same.
Oh yeah, I forgot he goes into this. Ideally, looking back, I should probably have tried to stick to the claim but we'll just keep listening to this for a second.
Well, so actually, sorry. Let's say we have two things. If they're exactly the same, then they're not even two things anymore, right? They're just one thing. Does that drive?
Maybe if I had like two apples next to each other and they're like, exact, down to the core
Yeah.
level copies.
Yeah.
Are they two apples or just one apple? I would assume there's
Well,
two there.
Yeah, I'm going
That's
to
how
try
I
to be
thought through
really
that
radical
too.
about saying
Okay.
the same. So it's sort of in the way that in logic you would say A equals A, or A is equivalent to A.
Okay.
And which means that those two symbols are talking about the same object. Because even if you have two apples which are, all of their properties, you might think that all of their properties are the same. However, they do occupy a different spatial location. There's something about them that causes them to be.
That's kind of what you were just saying. So
Yeah.
he's seconding what you said. Okay, good. Keep going.
Two rather than one. So there's some difference.
Okay.
Maybe we could debate that further. I'm not sure if, I'm not even sure that's correct, but it is what seems most plausible to me right now.
You have something, Dali? Okay.
So then, say for these two objects, let's say that they're totally different. If though they're totally different, that means they can't share any properties. There can't be anything that's true about one of them that is also true of the other one. However, at the very least, I'm thinking of both of these things. So they share at least one property, and you could even go further and say they can both be cognized by the human mind. So these two things cannot be either totally the same or totally different. The problem then seems to be they have to be a mix of sameness or difference. But then if you analyze them down into their component parts, and you take each of these component parts and say, okay, well, so we said that these parts must be some of them totally the same and some of them totally different. But if you go down to the parts, you then have the same problem, essentially. You have to say, okay, is this part totally the same or totally different? But we've already decided it doesn't make sense to think of them as totally the same.
I think at this point I'm pretty lost.
We're totally different. Does this sort of paradox follow? Is it not making sense in the right way?
Yeah, I'm not really following. I think I'm just hearing there's A and not A, but we can both think of A. So are they kind of potentially, similar in at least in the way that we can conceptualize A? I don't know. I'm kind of
Man,
Quantum
so
theory
this-
rules out the law of identity.
Okay. Yeah, Nathan.
this is just really hard to paraphrase. And paraphrasing in street epistemology, super important. And it's really challenging to do. Like, if you're watching this stream right now and you're at home watching us listen, I challenge you to like rewind it, play it to yourself, then pause it right when it's over, and try to repeat what you just heard. I'm trying right now and it's hard. I mean, I would probably say, I'm hearing you say that there is a spectrum of sameness and differentness between items in the universe. Is that right? And if the answer is yes, I want to know why this is significant, or how this implies anything. Doesn't everything have sameness and differentness from anything else? I'm a little, so like, yeah. And this is why I think just sticking with, like, in SE, we want to get to the why and how. We want to know how somebody knows something. Sometimes, though, you don't need to get out of the what. You could just stay there and really figure out what it is they're talking about. Because until they agree that you understand them, you might not. And when you get to why and how, it's a futile attempt because you don't agree on what it is you're talking about yet. So,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and if we find out a claim is incoherent or like not even meaningful, then why and how doesn't even come into the picture at all.
right.
So you have to be very clear. The claim
Mhm.
is, something that, and ideally something that can be testable, before you even get into why and how. And so far, I don't even know what we're talking about. And I think I tried to talk, go back to see how this relates to the original claim.
I'm hearing him basically say there's an ontology to the spectrum of sameness or differentness between things.
Yeah.
And I
think
don't
he's
know.
backing into ontology.
Yeah. Fascinating.
I think the law of identity is required to be rigid and certain in order that his ontological argument can make sense. And as a result, you're not going to see any examples. You're just going to see a reassertion of the principle of the law of identity. And of course,
Yeah.
quantum theory is the obvious counterexample.
One of my favorite questions to really help create a tunnel vision on this claim is to ask what the claim doesn't include. Because right now I'm at a loss as to what this claim wouldn't include between things. Or maybe it does include everything and that's necessarily involved in the claim itself. I'm not really sure. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe explain it again.
Yeah, sorry. I probably went on too long without trying to check in and make sure that I wasn't totally losing you.
No worries.
So what I'm trying to say is, well, did we get to basically saying if two objects, well, that it doesn't make sense to say that two objects are precisely the same, because if they were precisely the same, they wouldn't be two objects, they would be one object. You think that's right?
Maybe. And how does this relate to our original claim? What was our original claim?
Go ahead, try to tell two electrons apart. Really?
I'm on the wrong track. So what I was trying to use this basically to say that I think at base the world has to consist in some kind of unity. And so this was to address your question, which was why does it have to be one principle? Why an absolute? Why not, 5 principles, which are like the absolute set?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I was trying to do is basically to give one argument for why I think the world and everything that is has to at base be a unity. And if that's the case, then indeed there would be an absolute, and that would just be whatever the form of that unity is.
Okay, so the claim requires that indeed there has to be a single absolute principle, not potentially a set.
I think so.
And you have one potential argument this paradox argument to potentially demonstrate that there has to be a single principle. Hypothetically, if like we went through this argument, or we just really studied this, and for like the next week, maybe year or whatever, and we found this to be like potentially an argument that fails to convince us that there has to be a single argument. I'm not saying that's the case, but if we no longer felt that this was a good argument to demonstrate that there has to be a single principle, would your confidence about that claim change at all? So yeah, that was just the usual, making sure the claim is actually connected to the confidence type of question. Let's see what he says.
Yeah, totally. It absolutely would. I would be a part of that conversation, obviously. So, if it's almost a tautology to say that if we discovered that the argument was wrong, I say yes. If my argument failed there, then I would lower my belief in it.
Cool.
There is also a Platonic dialogue called the Parmenides, which argues a similar thing, and there's other things in the history of philosophy. And I actually haven't read that, but I'm just saying I would probably also want to explore other avenues as well. But yeah.
Cool. All right, so you're around 99% for this claim. Anything that could hypothetically you could learn to change your confidence about it, what would need to be the case?
So I guess I can
There
just
it
give
is.
my best guess of what would be true if this wasn't true.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if we discovered that somehow the meanings, the sort of kinds of way that we, make sense of things, types of experience in the world, if it became totally impossible to reconcile them in some higher order explanation, if there were just points where, maybe even reliable points where you knew, like, knowledge just doesn't fit with ethics, or there's no way to tie in aesthetic expression to scientific knowledge. Like, there's no way to understand the relationship between those things. If we discovered that over and over again,
like, do we know that knowledge does fit in with ethics now? Have we proven that? So, like, I give Matthew credit for standing up in front of the class. There's like a lot of people listening, and good for you, Matthew, for coming up and volunteering your time. I'm not entirely sure that disconfirmation criteria could ever be achieved, and I'm not sure that it has been proven in the first place that there's this connection. I don't know. It's interesting though. We're just airing out. This is the hardest question to answer. Even if I'm getting my beliefs challenged, the disconfirmation question, it's the golden question, right? It's the most important part. And so, yeah, good for Matthew for attempting to answer your question. This is the hardest one. Yeah, not much more to add besides that.
Yeah, so I didn't really hear much specific there, so then I go into a different type of question, but I think then he has to go. But yeah, and then
okay.
So yeah, we'll see what happens.
Good. We're nearly there.
It would seem that we sort of live in this balkanized world, where, despite the fact that we can inhabit all these different areas of meaning, there's a fundamental chasm between each of them. That seems like the alternative.
Cool. All right, cool. What I'm hearing you say is this principle kind of allows someone to break the barrier between the is and the ought divide or something. And
possibly, I don't know. That might be one of the breakpoints.
Yeah, maybe like last question. Who would you be like without this belief if you no longer believed it? Would you change as a person at all?
I think I would. It's difficult to say who I would be. Yeah, I think it would probably matter a lot to me. I think it is pretty core to who I am. And so even I was about to say, but, you know, in the name of truth, I would do it, you know, but what I mean there is essentially in the name of this, of the absolute, of this absolute thing, I would be okay with that. So even when I'm considering the possibility that it could be wrong, I am sort of embracing it with that idea still in mind. So that's how fundamental it is.
Wow.
Yeah.
It would be pretty tough for you if you no longer had this.
Yeah.
How would your
But
life
is
change
that's the last
specifically?
question? Oh, sorry, I thought that was the last question.
We
So I was
can,
about
we
to
can wrap it up
jump
there.
out.
Yeah, feel free. No worries.
Oh darn! I wanted to hear that answer. Yeah, what the like asking for a specific thing is really good, since if somebody believes this thing is morally consequential to them, like this belief helps me become good, or I'm not sure if that's necessarily what he said, though that tends often to be the case with somebody who says a lot would change. A lot would change. Asking for a specific example is a great way to then, let's say they say, you know, my life would lose meaning or something, or I would be more selfish. I came across somebody who said that to me recently. Then the question would then be, you know, is there would you have no reason to be selfless? Would you have no reason to be good? What's the second best reason? And this is your question usually, Reid, but like, what's the second best reason to be selfless? Is there a good reason for that? What's the second best reason to be good? Can you come up with any reasons for that? And that can kind of help dull the consequential aspects of this belief, which is holding the belief up. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I could have
Or
kept
potentially.
going.
Yeah.
Because
That's like the humanistic side of SE is like near the end, like the reasons, the values that we hold to that are holding up our idea.
yeah, and I forgot exactly where I heard the specific form of this question. Like, what did I say? Like, who would you be if you no longer had this belief? I saw that on Twitter somewhere and I forgot the source, but I immediately wrote that down. Like, that's a great way to ask that type of question. I usually ask,
Who would you be?
Yeah.
Okay.
I like that. Maybe I'll try to find the source of that for next time. So yeah, that was, then we kind of wrapped it up after that. And so hopefully, Matthew, if you'd see this, we can continue the conversation, because I still am not quite sure.
Great job, Matthew.
What this is about. I'd love to know more about it. And yeah, and it was interesting.
Absolutely loved it. It was great. That was a lot of fun. It was like a new take on an ontological argument, it sounded like, maybe. And it'd be, yeah, definitely be good to get some clarity on that. And Matthew, thanks for being brave and stepping up to the plate. And for anybody else that's watching, if you want to bump into Reid, myself, or any one of us SEers, there'll be something coming up on Clubhouse soon. And please like and subscribe these videos and share them around to people that are interested in SE.
Yep. Cool. Anything else, you guys, Dali or JCC?
While you guys are playing on Clubhouse, I'll keep Discord operating because I'm Android only.
Damn.
Very interesting talk. Yeah, way to go, Matthew. Really enjoyed it.
Cool. Yeah, everybody, check out Clubhouse. If you need any invites, it's still invite only Clubhouse as well. So if you need any invites, just try to find people on Discord who have Clubhouse, and we'll text you an invite. So sweet. Thanks everybody for watching, and we will be back soon. Thanks.
Awesome.
Great. See ya.